Isaiah chapter 5, and I know we've talked about it before, and I don't remember if we've actually looked directly at it or not. Probably did, because it's one of those that I'm drawn to a lot. We've talked about God being a master gardener. Shared that recently, how God's plan was when he took Israel as a choice vine, planted them in the place that he wanted them, and they were to produce fruit. We've talked about the parable in the New Testament where Jesus says, I sent my messengers or people to come and get the fruit, and then those leaders that were there, they'd beat them, and he was talking about the prophets, kill them, and then he says, I'll send my son, and they kill the son. And that he would take that vineyard away from those leaders, and he was dealing with the scribes, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, and they realized he was talking about them. But that theme of the vineyard, that theme of that garden, that area that God has, is something that runs throughout, and I say from the beginning to the very end. It's a picture more of grapes and fruit, and I came across a verse as I've been looking at it more and more that really spoke to me, and it took me off guard a little bit because it wasn't necessarily what I expected. And then as I started to look at it, I was like, wow, this is like a foundational one. This is what it's all about. And so, Isaiah chapter 5 is where he talks about that vineyard, but the fruit, when you think of fruit, when you think of God, and he's talking about fruit, and he's talking about grapes, things like that. What do you think of when you think of fruit in the Word of God, or dealing with God? If he's talking about fruit, if he's looking for fruit, in this case in Isaiah, he'll say, I came and looked for fruit and it wasn't there. I wanted grapes, but you gave me wild grapes and you shouldn't have. But when you think of fruit, what do you think of? Somebody tell me what you think of when you think of fruit and the Bible and the Word of God and God. What do you think fruit would be?
Christians look at their fruit.
We'll know them by their fruit. Believers or leaders, especially like that, they'll be known by their fruit. What is fruit? What is the fruit? Labors, works, that type of thing. Anyone else? Fruit. I hear fruit, I always think about the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, all those things. Goodness, kindness, patience. Adam and Eve, it kind of all centered around fruit, wasn't it? Knowledge of good and evil, or life, tree of life. Fruit, people call it an apple, but it's just some tradition, some painting somewhere, so they started calling it that. But it was a fruit of knowledge of good and evil. And then there was also the tree of life. So you think of that, eating the wrong fruit or the right fruit. And you get into grapes, and you get into wine, juice, fermented juice, which is wine, and you look at the Bible, and when it talks about, remember, Jesus, James and John come to him, sit on the right and the left, and he talks about a cup that he's going to drink of. I think Last Supper, right? Drinks from the cup, drinks the wine. We celebrate with communion the wine, juice from the fruit of the grapes. And what was the cup he was drinking of? It was judgment, wasn't it? It was the cross. He was taking the judgment for us, and he's like, yeah, you're going to drink of that cup too. Good luck, guys. That suffering that he was going through, all that type of things. And then you follow that, you'll see it throughout the Bible, especially like in Revelations. You see the cup of God's wrath, and he's going to make the nations drink of his wrath and that wine, and make them drunk with his wrath and things like that. And then you're starting to get into like this kind of a negative side of fruit and wine and all that stuff. The wine press of God's wrath that's being filled up to overflowing and coming out. And it's starting to get, it's not as much fun as just having a nice cup of wine and having a good day or something. All of a sudden this isn't so. But